So, the translations are out for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 350, and let's just say that in this chapter, we get the final reveal of how Dabi was born, and what led him up to becoming Dabi. And we see pretty much everything in this chapter, and we're gonna dive right into it. But first, right after this. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Drew, and I'm here to do my review of My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 350 titled Flames. Yes, this is a Todoroki, specifically Dabi focused chapter, and like I said in the intro, this chapter pretty much focuses on how Dabi came to be. More specifically, what happened in between that 10 to 11 year gap of him burning himself alive to where we are at this present time. And it's very interesting how we got to this point. There are some twists and turns, and by twists and turns, I mean some very predictable, yet very understandable, situation that he was in, and that when it comes to who Dabi is, that it could have potentially always been him, and that there was just a single moment that cemented the fact that he is now Dabi. So, let's dive more into this chapter and talk about who Dabi became and why he even exists. So, weirdly enough, we do not start the chapter off with Dabi or a Todoroki's, but no, we start off with a gorilla in a police station. And this isn't no ordinary police station. No, this is the police station that is holding the infamous Dr. Garaki. And it's very interesting that we start off with this because Dr. Garaki does play a big role in the creation of Dabi, or at least what happened to Dabi after he, burnt himself to ash. Because the doctor is talking about how, oh yes, everything is already going, isn't it? Yeah, there aren't that many police here, so yeah, I guess the war has beginning. And I'm just gonna tell you this, what we really wanted was to look for those stunted seeds so that we can find wicked seeds to be worthy vessels of all for one. So from what we give the doctor in the present time with this part of the chapter and what we get later on in the chapter, what they were looking for were seeds or individuals that would be vessels for all for one. Confirming that all for one's objective always and foremost was to find a vessel for his failing body, and that weirdly enough, this is something that was being done even before his fight with All Might, showing that the fight with All Might was just a formality, that he was always going to get a new body so that he could kind of live forever. So it shows that All For One's plan always had multiple layers to it, and that pretty much everything could have been planned out from the start, which is going to give credence to a whole bunch of more theories, specifically one, the best theory ever, Dad for One. So if it is revealed that Uzuku's dad is Dad for One, I will not be surprised, but I will be slightly disappointed. But pretty much from there, we do get more flashback or more context to how Dabi or how Toya was able to survive the fire at Seko Peak. He apparently found a small puddle that I guess put out his fire, but as I said, this is a story about how All For One had everything planned, and as we see him in this puddle, in this river, just burnt to a crisp, we just see this suited man with a hat just walking up. Wait, actually, I think I have the exact same hat. Wait one moment. See? Exact same hat! Alright, yeah, no, I'm not going to keep this on for the entire video. Let me just take it off. Yeah, I got a second hat on. Anyway, yes, this suited figure, most likely than not, is All For One, which pretty much confirms that anytime we see a guy wearing a suit with a black hat, yeah, it's most definitely All For One. So that means that most likely than not, the person that we saw during Tomura's flashback was All For One, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get a Toga flashback where it's revealed that All For One was there, another one with Spinner, another one with Compress. All For One is just everywhere. But what's very interesting about that is that it's later revealed that after 3 years of being in a coma, Toya is actually alive and is in a facility most likely run by All For One and the Doctor, where there are apparently also other kids here who are also potentially other vessels or other experiments for the Doctor to perform very similar, if not grotesque, experiments to lead to the final result that we eventually get via Shigaraki. So yes, Toya wakes up from his coma after 3 years, and like anyone, realizes that his voices has changed, his body has gone through other changes, and that he's not the same boy that he used to be like 3 years ago, both literally and very figuratively. Because it is revealed that it wasn't just puberty that hit Toya with the puberty stick, but also the experimentations that were done upon him, because his body was just in a state of just being so destroyed and so charred that they literally had to graft someone else's skin and someone else's body parts into his body. Which means that Toya is less Toya and more a combination of other people, as we meet this very creepy sunflower looking guy who is telling Toya that, yeah, you can't leave. You're with your new family, so stay here. You can't leave, with that creepy smile on his face. And from here, we have some interesting dialogue and back and forth with Toya and the sunflower dude, as a individual also appears on a monitor just via voice. So this is either Dr. Garaki or most likely All For One telling Toya what he needs to do. Because Toya wants to leave, he wants to get out, he wants to go see his father, he wants to see his father and have his father recognize him, and he also wants to apologize for his family members, which is something very interesting because from my perspective, I didn't think that Toya would actually care about his family as much and that he mainly cared about his father. But at least from this translation, he says that he wants to apologize to his mom as well, showing that he still cares for his family, and that he realizes what he may have said or what he may have done is wrong, and he just wants to reunite with them. Which makes sense for someone who is a kid who feels as if they've done something wrong and is filled with guilt and wanting to go to their parents and apologize to them for their actions. But as All For One confirms, that Toya isn't really Toya that much, and that his body has gone through so many different changes, and that they've gone through so many different experiments just to keep him alive, and that they really wanted him to become a vessel for All For One, but unfortunately that's not going to be the case. They wanted him to join their ranks, but alas, he is just a failure, and this is what breaks Toya down. And as All For One gives the same lines his father and his mother gave to him, Toya says that the only thing that he wants to learn, or the only person that he wants to learn from, is Endeavor. And we get something very terrifying with the implications. We once again cut over to Garaki saying how when it comes to someone like All For One, how even for him it was impossible to manipulate Toya for what Endeavor had did to his mind, to his head, as we see that Toya most likely set a building on fire filled with kids, probably killing the kids and the sunflower dude. I mean, I cannot condone the killing of kids, Mr. Anakin, but you could kill the sunflower dude and I'll be okay with it. But once again, the doctor comes back and saying, he's like, yeah, we couldn't really control him. And what's even more amazing is that he was supposed to die within a month. If you didn't realize that, yeah, Dabi is still alive and he was able to survive for 11 years and he was reunited with Dr. Garaki. And what's very interesting about this is that apparently he knew about Dr. Garaki and All For One. And so when they finally met up, he came to a realization like, oh yeah, you're the person that saved me, right? As we see that this is the moment where Dabi gets to see Hood, the hooded Nomu, and they do have an interaction. And the interaction is very fascinating and kind of gives a delve into who Dabi is, or more specifically, what he is at this moment, because he comes to a realization that what the doctor, what All For One wanted to do with him is to pretty much make him into a Nomu, and he probably doesn't know about him being a host to All For One, but that he was going to be turned into a Nomu. And as Dr. Garaki wants to understand how he is the way he is, how he was able to survive for 11 years, he comes to a conclusion that what Dabi did is that he overcame even death, and that he's only held together by flames of vengeance. And this is very interesting because this is something that was heavily implied with Shigaraki and how his hatred brought himself back from the brink of death. And the implication in this chapter is that the only reasoning why Dabi is still alive, not necessarily because of the modifications that may have been done on his body, but that he is still alive because of the vengeance that he holds in his heart, that from what we get in this chapter was not lit at the moment where he attacked Shoto. It wasn't lit at the moment where he burnt himself to ash, but it was lit at the moment that he returned home and realized that nothing had quote unquote changed. Because it is revealed that Dabi or Toya did go home, and that all he really wanted to know is that his father cared about him, that his father missed him, and that things had changed and weren't the same. But he came back and he saw that Endeavor was still training Shoto to surpass All Might. And it was at that moment where Toya believed that his family had forgotten him, and that his father never remembered him, and that it was just the same as it always was. And this was the moment that he really truly believed that he was a failure, and most likely the moment he became Dabi. Which is very ironic in the way, because even though nothing had quote unquote changed, the reasoning why nothing changed is because Toya had died, and that this was Endeavor's way of coping with his first son's death. So even though nothing had quote unquote changed, it did still affect the family, and they were still in this state because he was no longer there. And from how I view it, through this implication, I do believe that if Toya did come back and introduce himself to his father as Toya, that it would have completely changed, and that he would have shown his son that he truly did love and care for him. But he didn't realize that the reasoning why Endeavor did all of this was because he died, and that because he left, he was unable to truly change and double down on this training regimen with Shoto. So yeah, it was pretty much at that moment that Dabi was born, and we have Dabi saying how with all of this that he crossed the limit, he crossed the line, that he continued to increase his flames, increase his firepower, even to the point where his body is pretty much burnt to ash and is a rotting corpse, as we see just pieces of his body flying off. And how the more he saw Endeavor, the more he saw his moves, the more he started to copy Endeavor, the more that his heart started to pound and the crazier he got, where Toya eventually died and Dabi was born. It's pretty amazing and horrible to see how these situations possibly could have been avoided with just slightly different interpretations of the situation, and that with context makes these situations even more tragic, especially with the character of Dabi. And then you just have Dr. Garaki, a man of science, giving a monologue about how fire or heat works or what it is, and that when it comes to the heat that was inside of Dabi, that it was something that even the Demon Lord gave up on, because it is the fatal flames of insanity, as we see in the final part of this chapter, where Dabi has finished telling Toya his life story and saying that he's going to burn everything that Endeavor holds dear to the ground, and that will be proof of his existence, as he's about to use Flash Fire Fist, as Shoto tells him that he's not gonna allow him to do that. End of the chapter. So, Dabi's definitely going to die, as we see that more of his body is burnt off. And I think how he's going to die from the implications of this chapter is that Shoto or Endeavor or whoever is going to force him to give up on his vengeance, give up on his revenge, his anger, his hatred, and that as soon as that happens, he's gonna die. Like, there's no way that Dabi lives after this speech and what he's done to his body. He is definitely going to die, but he's going to die a changed person, most likely than not. So yeah, pretty much what this chapter was is just showing how Dabi came to this point, and that when it comes to who Dabi is and who Toya was, it's kind of showing that he was going to be led down this path pretty much from the fact that he was just the first son of Endeavor, and that he had this powerful flame quirk. Because something else that I didn't bring up in the chapter as well is that his flames are technically weaker now than they were when he was a kid because of the body modifications that were made to him. But even so, his flames are just so much intense and have so much fiery flair than any fire that we've seen in the series so far. So I think that what this story is showing us via Dabi is that this was kind of an inevitability, that due to how society was and how it was built up when it comes to characters like Shigaraki, even when it comes to Dabi, that these seeds were always going to exist, and that all they really needed was a spark, enough water, enough soil for them to be bloomed into this wicked vestige. And that when it comes to Dabi, this was more or less what he was going to be when Toya was born and was influenced by Endeavor's will, his goal, his ambitions. So I'm still under the idea that this was going to be an inevitability for Dabi just because he was born with this wicked seed, but that what pushed him to this moment was just the right spark that allowed his flames to grow. So yeah, pretty much what this entire chapter was is just Dabi's backstory between the 11 years between the past and the present, and showing the connections that he has with Dr. Garaki, and pretty much showing who Dabi is at his core and how he is still able to exist in this world, and potentially foreshadowing to what could eventually be his downfall, which would be giving up on his vengeance for Endeavor, for Shoto, for Hero Society, which will lead to him dying. So yeah, that's pretty much all I really have to say about this chapter. I'm definitely going to be making another video talking about just Toya, his life, from beginning to end, the influences that Endeavor had on him, as well as potentially also going over some issues that I have with the translations for a little bit more clarity. And unfortunately, My Hero Academia is going to be on break next week, so we're going to have to wait another 2 weeks for either more of this fight between Shoto and Dabi, or cutting over somewhere else and seeing a completely different fight. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this chapter. Hopefully you enjoyed this review. I know for a fact that I really enjoyed this chapter. And if you want to see more content like this, subscribe to my YouTube channel where I do discussions, reviews, as well as cover the spoilers for My Hero Academia. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!